Hello, citizens. Councillor Gian-Carlo Carra here. On Monday, the 27th, I gave you a little bit of an update about the budget proceedings that we were involved in that week. From the 27th till Thursday, late in the afternoon, on the 30th, 4 days of council deliberations, we have delivered the final adjustment of the four-year budget for the period starting in 2015 to 2018. I'm very pleased with where we got to. Obviously, when we were planning the budget, I should have said 2014 to 2018, when we were planning the four-year budget cycle, we were dealing with the biggest boom that the city had ever experienced. And literally overnight, instead of planning for 40,000 new residents every year, the largest growing city in North America, the fastest growing city in North America, we were dealing with a downturn that was probably the deepest in our city's history. And so the fourth year budget, every year we had to adjust the budget to deal with the new reality. And this fourth year budget was a tough one because we're transforming the organization into a leaner, meaner, smarter, more effective organization. We're trying to deliver more for less. And we're trying to sort of keep everything, prices down to respect the fact that we're all not doing as well as we have in past years. At the same time, we're starting to coil and get our feet underneath us for the next four-year budget and for the next 4 years of economic growth, which are looking to be stronger and stronger, especially because we're building a city of great neighborhoods that are going to allow us to diversify our economy, to be more cost-effective, and to survive and thrive long into the future. So here are the highlights of the 2018 budget adjustments. Number one, we asked administration to come in around 0% increase while not hurting frontline services. And they did that. They came in actually a little bit underneath a 0% increase. But what had changed, and what every single member of council heard at the doors, myself included, was concerns about our crime and safety situation. One of the really problematic things about the downturn is that it has combined with fentanyl on our streets to create a crime wave for Calgarians. And crime and safety are extremely important to citizens, and our police force was quite frankly overwhelmed because we'd been keeping them holding steady as our population grew and as the crime wave went up. And so we made an adjustment, a $20 million adjustment to the budget to account for new officers, a bunch of back-of-house stuff that they need for training and everything, and most importantly, body-worn cameras that will sort of bring them in as a best practice police force across North America. That was, I think, almost unanimously supported by council. $20 million takes us from below zero to above zero. The other conversation that we had, and as you know, I am City Council's representative on Family and Community Support Services Association of Alberta. Family and Community Support Services is a unique to Alberta program that's based on the idea that if we invest in prevention, we save ourselves massive amounts of money on the back end. And there was a very thoughtful conversation on the floor of council about spending $20 million on the back end dealing with policing issues. At the same time, we were potentially cutting frontline services, cutting preventative services out of our community neighborhoods, out of our social services. And that didn't sit well with council, certainly didn't sit well with me. And I'm very proud to say that council took $3 million out of our rainy day fund and put it into a prevention program for the next year that we may or may not turn into a permanent program. But really the idea is that if we're taking $20 million on the back end, we should invest an equal amount of money on the front end to save us that money down the road. And I'm very proud that we did that work. Administration is happy to have that money and to be able to work with partners in the community and stand by, because that $3 million and how we spend it is going to be coming back to us, and we'll be talking about it in a future video. The other thing that we did was we had a long conversation about some of the cuts that we were doing, and it was very much determined that a lot of those cuts were very prudent and thoughtful cuts. But something that did not sit well with council was the $4.7 million we were taking out of transit lines. And that's actually something that we have heard from a lot of citizens. They're saying, this is not the time to cut down on transit. At the same time, our transit numbers are low, and you don't want to involve yourself in a death spiral. You don't want to start cutting transit hours because you're not getting the ridership you want to see, and the less transit you supply, the less people ride, and your transit department goes down the tubes. We've got a great transit department. We're not in danger of that, but we certainly don't want to get involved in that kind of momentum. And so what we talked about was going potentially with the cuts that were proposed, but taking $4 million and putting that $4 million into very thoughtful route analysis and route provision. So they might be restoring some of the services, or they might be holding on some of the services that they were talking about cutting back, but they might also be moving things around and being even more efficient, and I'm happy about that. That $4 million went into the base. Something that we were talking about putting into the base, but we did not, was the low-income bus fare. We did fund that, however. So as you recall, I was a big advocate for a sliding scale. We used to have a low-income bus pass that cost a certain amount of money, and if you made a lot less money than that, that was out of reach for you. If you made a lot more money than that, maybe you weren't able to make it, but it still was too costly. And so what we talked about was creating a sliding scale for bus entry that, fit how much money you made. So the people who are at the lowest end of the income spectrum would be able to get onto the bus and onto the trains, and the people who are just above the cutoff might need it too. We did not have enough money to fully implement the sliding scale, and we had the decision, do we push it above the cutoff, or do we push it deep into the people who need it most? And the decision was made that for the first low-income bus fare sliding scale, we would push it deeper into the people who needed it more. And we actually came up with a $5.50 bus pass monthly. And we expected a certain number of people to use it. And so the city put in some money and the province put in some money. And what we found was that there were thousands and thousands more Calgarians who were eligible and in need of that service. And what that represented was a $4 million hole in the budget for our low-income bus fare. Now, something that council did over the last 7 years that I am a massive champion of, and I think is really important, is that we have consciously decoupled the business of running our transit system from the important work of subsidizing Calgarians who need access to that transit system. And we've done that for two reasons. Number one, it is a core responsibility of the City of Calgary to fund a transit system that works. And we can't run a transit system that works if we don't understand what it costs and what the actual business is about. So we got focused on the business of transit. The other thing is we have to be very compassionate and caring and appreciative of the needs and the mobility needs of our citizens, and we have to take care of them. But at the same time, we have to understand that that's not a core city responsibility. It is a provincial responsibility, and it is a federal responsibility, and primarily provincial though. But if we hide the cost of that in the business of running transit, we can't make adequate arguments to our partners in other orders of government that they need to step up. And so when we decoupled it, it's very clear that we have a $4 million hole in our low-income bus fare. We took money out of a rainy day fund, out of our savings account, to pay for it for another year. We're going to the province and say, look, this is really your responsibility. Let's work together and make sure that Calgarians, Albertans, Canadians are moving around the city like they need to be. What else can I tell you about the budget? The other big one, the really massive one, is, there's two others. As you know, I'm a massive, massive advocate of the Green Line. I'm also a massive advocate of making sure that when the province leaves tax room on the table, we keep that tax room so more and more of the percentage of tax dollars that Calgarians are already paying stay in Calgary working for Calgarians. In the last provincial budget, there was $23 million of tax room left on the table. That means for every dollar of property tax that we collect later in the year, about 40 cents on the dollar gets requisitioned by the province and taken up to Edmonton. When the amount of money that we expect the province is going to ask for doesn't completely agree with the amount of money they're asking from us, we've got a little bit of room. And that little bit of room amounts to massive amounts of money when you spread it across the city. And we had a $23 million hit. Last year, we decided to do a one-year refund to the citizens of Calgary to keep our tax increase low in the downturn in the economy. but we held on to it because we knew that we would probably need it. And what we absolutely need it for is to cover the financing charges on the Green Line. When the city says it's putting $1.53 billion into the Green Line, that's spread out across 30 years. And that means that we don't have all the money up front, which means that we have to borrow the money when we need it, and then more and more of that $53 million a year is going to go into interest payments and less into the actual capital. And so with this $23 million a year, we can actually pay the interest and actually let the $53 million become an actual $1.53 billion working for the citizens of Calgary building the Green Line. Super important. It's money that was already taken, and so it's now money that's staying in Calgary working for Calgarians. And I'm super proud that a large majority of council agreed to support that. The final thing that we did was we took, as we did last year, around $60 million out of our savings account, and we put it into the non-residential tax base to smooth out the massive shift in assessment that occurred when the property values in our downtown core plummeted. So what we recognized, and what I've been saying actually for years, is that our downtown core has been floating our ability to provide services across the entire city. And when the downtown core lost value because we are legislated into a zero-based approach, we have to collect the same amount of money. So as one area goes down, everyone else has to come up. And what that meant was that in this downturn in the economy, non-residential tax bases throughout the city started to have to pay more. And we said that's not fair. Instead of, and what we did was we capped it, no one will be paying more than 5%. And there was a very thoughtful debate on that. There was a conversation about, well, maybe if we're trying to help businesses, instead of taking it out of the non-residential tax base, let's take it out of the business tax, which is disappearing. And the answer to that question is we don't know what makes the most sense. And so the motion that we pass allows us to do either based on what makes the most sense. But the important thing to know is that we are continuing to take money out of our savings accounts, put that in. And what's interesting is that we had a $50 million savings. We budgeted, we were prepared to spend that, we didn't spend it, and so that money basically washes out and helps protect us for another year from any undue spikes across the city in the non-residential tax base. So at the end of the day, we did add on to the budget. We didn't hold it zero. The average home in Calgary, the Joe average house, and I don't know what price point that is, but the average house on their monthly property tax bill is going to be paying about $5 more than they did last year. Of course, that doesn't always hold because sometimes property values go up, sometimes they go down, so it's very sort of complicated. But given the fact that we've cut back on a lot of things, we've taken money out of savings to cover other things, we put money into crime and safety, we put money into making sure that our transit's still moving, I think we've put together a budget that very respectfully deals with the downturn in the economy while also sort of coiling and getting ready to continue to grow our city into prosperity, into a future of a diversified economy, a city of great neighborhoods that really sort of connect everyone together in a much more sustainable way. What's going to happen now that we've passed the budget is we're going to sit down and start talking with Calgarians very seriously about the next 4-year budget cycle. I'm very excited about it. We're calling it One Calgary. And I love that name for 2 reasons. Number one, it's because we're trying to more and more not be a bunch of departments doing random things. We're trying to be an organization that delivers as a whole, holistic needs to a city. And I love that great neighborhoods message is getting through and is becoming part of business as usual. The other thing I love is that point 5 of Great Neighborhoods talks about the need to become a city in our own right, a government in our own right, to chart our own future, take control of our future. And that's happening. Our relationship with the province, we are in the process of signing a city charter. And for the first time in the city's history, we are a government of, by, and for the people and not a service corporation. That means very little to normal citizens, but it's so important. And I think that in this One Calgary budget, we have to really bring it front and center and take this opportunity to say, for the first time in our history, for the first 100+ years of Calgary, We were a service corporation. Now we are a government of, by, and for the people, an actual order of government. It's time for us to start the clock at 1 and start looking forward and talk about the kinds of people that we are. And I think this is a big opportunity to take our Indigenous policy framework, our gender equity and diversity work, our cultural planning work, our healthy communities work, work that is so important and fundamental but doesn't sit in the regular departmental life of the city, and really give it a home at the start of our city's future. So I'm super excited about that. I'm super excited to work with everybody over the next year as we develop the One Calgary business plan and budget. And thank you so much. Looking forward to working with you. Have a fabulous holiday season if I don't talk to you before then.